if you are using a plastic cutting board, you can be ingesting anywhere up to 50 grams of microplastic per year.
10 to 100 times more polluted is the air indoors than outdoors, which is wild. Because then you're like, well, why?
There's just not enough ventilation going on in the house. There's excess moisture leading to mold formation, mold growth. All of these things are being kicked up into the air that we breathe.
Studies have shown that if you use aluminum in your kitchen, so for example, utensils, cookware, aluminum foil, you are walking around with double the amount of aluminum in your blood compared to someone who doesn't. And when they look at white blood cells in the same sample where they kind of tested for aluminum, the white blood cells are showing oxidative damage, DNA damage. We don't really know what that translates to in terms of hard outcomes yet, in terms of diseases. But for me as a doctor, I don't think that's a good thing, right? Oxidative stress or oxidative damage is kind of like rust, right? It's the creation of these free radicals, these chemicals that now can damage our cells and cause DNA damage. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, we don't really think about, I know that I didn't think about aluminum foil. Of course, I know a ton about cookware and all that stuff, but aluminum foil seems so harmless and just like, non-threatening. It's just like this sheet of thing. It doesn't seem like it can be damaged or like end up in my food or in the environment. But with that being said, we know that aluminum has significant, at least tons of studies with neurodegenerative conditions.
Yes.
Right. So this isn't just something to just like ignore. But with that being said, if aluminum foil, if we're using that for cooking purposes, is there something better that we can be using?
I think it depends on what you're using your aluminum foil for, right? So studies show that if it's wrapped around meat or anything acidic or anything with salt, or if you're combining your foil with another metal. So for example, you have your steak sitting on a stainless steel tray and then you cover it with aluminum foil. All of that increases the leaching of aluminum into your food. They've shown that the content of aluminum in food cooked, wrapped in aluminum foil can be up to 40 times higher than food not wrapped in aluminum. So ask yourself, do you really need to use aluminum? First of all, what does that actually achieve? Are you trying to wrap in moisture, or is it you just don't want to clean up, right? If it's because you don't want to clean up, maybe rethink that, because the impact on your health could be long-term, it's cumulative. Now, if that's your only exposure and you're not exposed to aluminum anywhere else, it's probably not a big deal. But I think the WHO safe limit for aluminum per day is 2 milligrams per kilogram per day. And CDC estimates that Americans are exposed to about 10 milligrams per kilogram per day. So we're exceeding what we should be exposed to every day. And over the long term, if that's not coming out of our bodies, that could then lead to downstream issues we don't know about yet.
So what are some other options that we can use? So, for example, if aluminum foil makes stuff easy, like if somebody's trying to slap some bacon, into the air fryer or into the oven or something like that, and putting on a dish, a tray. What could they use instead?
I would say unbleached parchment paper is probably a better choice. So there's no heavy metal there. There is a layer of silicone on those usually. But as long as the contact is not, for a long time, or you're not putting it at extremely high heat above 400, you're usually okay.
Got it. Okay, so parchment paper. But again, being mindful of the type of parchment paper that you're using as well.
Exactly. But you could just put it straight on a stainless steel tray, right? And then I know the cleanup, but spray it with some good non-toxic all-purpose and let it soak, and it should all come out.
Yeah. That's the convenience factor. You just said it too. It's like that's one of the things that really gets us a lot of times.
Yes.
You know what? This reminds me too. My wife was actually upset because somebody broke. She's got this somebody gifted it to us, a little wooden cutting board. And so, she was putting the dishes away and saw that it was broken. And she was like, who broke my cutting board? And, but then we also had this plastic cutting board that was there as kind of the alternative because we didn't get rid of it yet. And of course, after having this conversation, I'm going to send it to her. Let's talk about plastic cutting boards, another kitchen favorite.
Yeah. Most people think that plastic cutting boards are better because they're advertised as antimicrobial and you can put it in the dishwasher. But that's probably one of the worst things you can do, because when it's advertised as antimicrobial, it's often coated with something called microban. So that's a solution of antimicrobials that can contain endocrine disruptors like benzalkonium, quaternium products. And then secondly, studies have shown if you put plastic into a dishwasher, you're increasing the likelihood of leaching of microplastic into your food. So you're increasing the ingestion of microplastic when you're putting the food on that plastic cutting board and cutting it. And thirdly, a study just published last year showed that if you are using a plastic cutting board, you can be ingesting anywhere up to 50 grams of microplastic per year. So that's about 12 credit cards worth of plastic, up to that. So it depends on what type of cutting boards, what you're doing with your boards, what you're cutting, that all kind of contributes to how much you're ingesting. But, that's a pretty crazy amount.
Holy moly. All right. So the alternative for the plastic cutting boards, which again, it's very just kind of integrated into our culture, what should we be using?
So studies have shown that wooden cutting board is actually more antimicrobial just naturally compared to plastic. So you don't need to be coating it with microban or anything. Just wood, straightforward wood is naturally antimicrobial. And what I suggest people do, because the first question people ask me is, well, I cut meat on my cutting board. Like, how do I disinfect it? Keep a board for meat and one for your veggies and fruits. And I would suggest wooden for both. But if you really don't like the idea of wood and you must use a plastic, then don't put it in a dishwasher. Hand wash it. And don't cut so hard. So in this study, they showed that if you're cutting carrots on the plastic board, you're generating more microplastic. And that makes sense because if you're cutting something really hard, you're making deeper cuts, right? Like if you hold up a plastic cutting board, you see all the scratch marks. That's all the microplastic that's now in you.
Yeah, we think if we're not seeing like a bunch of shredded pieces of plastic, it's not there, but in reality, when we're cutting into that cutting board, that plastic cutting board, is absolutely getting into our food.
Yeah. So it's the nano plastics that you can't even see. That's 1,000th of a millimeter. You can't see that. You can maybe see the microplastics. That's, less than 5 millimeters.
Yeah.
But most of it you're just not seeing.
So again, this is about being informed. And next time you buy a cutting board, get yourself a wooden cutting board. Just phase. I'm a big fan of phasing out because we still have like a larger plastic cutting board and a small one, but we also have multiple wood ones too. Minus her favorite one that got broke because it was like a little one that she cuts like fruit on for my son.
I'm very attached to my cutting board, so I know how she feels.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about another very common kitchen favorite, and just leaning more into these plastics is plastic storageware. So I saw recently there's some data that came out about microwaving our food in these plastic containers and how much microplastics was getting into our food.
Yeah, pretty mind-blowing how much is released during microwaving, because you'll see on the bottom of these plastic bowls or boxes, it says microwave safe. But what it means is that it just won't melt in a microwave. But in that particular study you're referring to, they showed that per cubic centimeter, the box is releasing millions of microplastic and billions of nanoplastics per cubic centimeter. So how big is your box usually? Much bigger than that. So And that's for microwaving 3 minutes only.
Right.
It's not even that long. So whatever you do, if you have to store your food in plastic, then transfer it out onto a plate before you microwave it.
And also this study found too, even storing it in plastic at even at cold temperatures, like
Yes.
putting it in the freezer, for example, there's going to be leaching of that plastic into your food over time. But again, and this is the thing too, plastics they're everywhere, right? So integrated into our culture. And there are smarter ways to interact with plastics, but just being mindful, especially of heating them, especially heating up food, putting hot food directly into
100%.
plastics. You want to avoid that. But there are also so many cool alternatives now. We've just been phasing out over time. We still got some plastic containers.
Yeah.
But we've got, I'm a big fan of these stainless steel containers that we use a lot. And they've got like silicone lids. So I'm a big fan of those.
Yeah, I love those. I love glass as well. It's heavy, I know. Plastic is convenient, I know, but that convenience is costing us. I think last year they published a study that showed the chemicals that are released from plastic is costing us in healthcare costs to the tune of $250 billion in 1 year.
Wait, say that again.
So the chemicals that can leach from plastic is costing us in health cost $250 billion a year in 1 year.
This is ridiculous.
And it goes back to the obesogens we're talking about. So we're seeing increase in obesity rate, diabetes, insulin resistance, fertility issues. People are brain fogged. They're fatigued. The list goes on and on. Increased risk of cancer, autoimmune diseases, all of these added together is what we're experiencing, but nobody's putting the pieces back together.
But then when you start really looking at what is a major driver of chronic disease and cancer, has a lot to do with what we're exposed to at home, right? That's the environmental toxins. One of the major things is air quality, right? Particularly we're under this false pretense that outside air is more polluted than indoor air. And maybe sometimes, especially if there's wildfires, but on average, right? And this is from the EPA, on average, 10 to 100 times more polluted is the air indoors than outdoors, which is wild. Because then you're like, well, why? Well, there's different reasons why. One, because we don't always open our windows. But two, because we use cleaning products in there, bleach, Lysol, all those nasties, right? There is it's partly connected to cooking, especially with Teflon, all of those particles released in the air. Couches, rugs, beds, not to overwhelm anyone, but just to bring that attention that there's the concept of off-gassing. It's actually a phenomenon that happens. And that off-gassing, those chemicals get into the air. We breathe them in. Children, dogs, us, we're all exposed to these things. So for me, I don't care if you live in LA or not, it's essential that you have something purifying your air throughout the day. And I have 3 air purifiers in my home, and one, because I suffered with mold a few years ago and I got really, really sick. Like my mental cognitive health was a mess. My brain was inflamed. I couldn't remember words. It was bad. And moving into this new place, I could tell there was some musty, moldy smell in one of the closets. So I put an air purifier in there and I put a dehumidifier. Never felt the issues again symptomatically. But that's why it's important. It's not just the off-gassing chemicals. It's not just pollution from wildfires coming in, particulate matter. It's also the mold aspect. The home is a living environment. We have to not think about it any other way, right? It's dynamic. There's mold growing, it's going away. There's off-gassing, there's pesticides being tracked in from your dog or your children. And we have resiliency, but something that's really going to help is something like an air purifier. That's why it's important, especially in the room that you're in the most. So I would assume that's a bedroom, or if you're working from home, maybe an office, keep those air purifiers in there. They're not all created equal. There's different branches of them, but the one that I recommended you is for bang for buck. It's really one of the best up out there. But the HEPA is the big bread and butter for that, right? That's catching all of them. That's why you have to change the filter, the HEPA filter. But it's catching all that particulate matter, right? Which is really, really, really important. Particularly if you're not good about cleaning your home and you're accumulating dust, that's where all those toxins sit, right? Not only the off-gassing chemicals, but also things like mold spores, they're in the toxins. So what I tell people is if you have a child who suffers with allergies or asthma or anything, skin issues, or you do, or someone's sick and you can't, no doctor can put their finger on it. They go, we can't find it. You have to look at indoor air quality. You have to. There's no way around it, because it's likely that there's something in the home that is exacerbating symptoms and causing inflammation in your child or you or your dog, something.
Even beyond that, so there are many other air purifiers, filters, but you mentioned just simply opening a window because of the dramatic difference in indoor air quality versus outdoor air quality. Open a window, get the air circulating. So let's talk about some simple things that people can do, like simply opening a window. What about turning a fan on? Can that help?
Exactly. So there's some cheap mechanisms out there where you can put them on your window and it'll have the negative pressure bringing air out from the inside, which will be really helpful. Maybe you can have that running for 45 minutes to an hour in your home or something, right? But opening the windows is so important, right? Because the air is going to be able to circulate. It's going to be able to blow out. And a lot of us, man, I had this friend and she was telling me her parents never open the windows. And we're talking about for years, it's just always closed and there's no airflow. And there's absolutely mold in the home, or, it's for me, I don't understand. Even in the winter, like when I was back in Jersey and I was learning about this, it was cold. And I remember when it was in college, my mom used to get mad because I used to open the windows and talk about how I'm messing up the heat. But I just for 40 minutes, I just let the airflow and then close them all up. But we can do that. That's a simple intervention. Another one is, especially when you're cooking, open up the window or turn on your air purifier. I don't know if you used yours when you're cooking. A red light will go on when it's exposed to toxins at a higher load than it wants. So almost every time you cook, it'll sense it. Right? Because the combustion particles are going in the air and it's sensing it going, whoa, okay, I got to clean up. I got to go on elevation mode. I got to go on 4 out of 4. And so making sure that you're opening a window, putting on your air purifier. Also getting away from non-stick. Non-stick is a really nasty chemical called PFAS. Those are the forever chemicals. And if you watch, do you ever see the movie Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo? It is fantastic. And it talks about Teflon and how DuPont had pushed PFAS into the nonstick, but it made a whole town in, I believe, West Virginia really sick, and how they tried to cover it up and how they tried to pay off people and how they elevated lawyer fees and just, drew out the whole court case. But those PFAS are nasty and they're in nonstick pans. So if you have Teflon, I would highly, highly recommend throwing that away. And then simple things like utilizing non-toxic cleaners, right? If you're using bleach, stop. Right? Because that can cause asthma in your children, not exacerbate, literally create and cause asthma in your child. If your child has asthma, you have to throw the bleach away and get a non-toxic cleaner. You can literally make them at home. And you can use Castile soap, baking soda, right? There's borax, there's lemon formulas, there's essential oils. There's so many things you can use. So you don't need to spend $1 million to do this. You can just make simple interventions and the home air is going to be elevated by exponential amounts.
Even with over 20 years as a nutritionist, coach, and research scientist, the impact of our air quality was something I simply glossed over with very general knowledge. But the recent LA fires changed all that. Not only did I learn about the ramifications of wildfires, better described as chemical fires when man-made buildings, cars, and other structures are involved, I also learned how our air quality affects us in our day-to-day lives, regardless of where we live in the world. The impact that our air quality has on our sleep, our cognitive function, immune system function, and more have completely blown my mind. For instance, a recent study in collaboration with MIT found that even minor reductions in our air quality creates reductions in our brain function and negatively impacts our decision-making. Specifically, the researchers noted that it was the buildup of particulate matter in our indoor environment that leads to worse brain function. I've made a habit of opening windows when the outside air and environment is viable to do so. But the most effective thing I've done that is supporting my air quality all of the time is utilizing the #1 air purifier in the world for my home and for my office. The Jasper Air Purifier eliminates and filters chemicals, mold, volatile organic compounds, bacteria, viruses, pet dander, and even harmful cooking particulates that fill our home when cooking. Jasper has a unique 3-stage filter with air scrubber technology, all in one pre-filter, HEPA, and carbon filter. And this is why Jasper is able to capture 99.97% of dust, allergens, and dander with its powerful filtration. And that's the thing. It's incredibly powerful, but whisper quiet. You need several standard air purifiers blasting at their highest setting to even get close to what Jasper can do quietly and more effectively. In most home spaces, Jasper has been proven to reduce more than 99% of the fine particulate matter like smoke, pollen, and dust in just 20 minutes. The amazing thing about it is that getting your air quality right is something that you can pretty much set and forget and let the benefits happen automatically while living your life as you normally would. I'm sleeping even better, experiencing more energy, and little weird things like an occasional headache that I attributed to other things have vanished. And the solution was in the air all along. My wife will tell you that I'm a little bit obsessed with this now. I'm running different experiments, constantly analyzing studies, and I'm working to share this knowledge with everyone. And right now, you can get a new Jasper for your home, your office, or any space that you want cleaner air for $200 off when you go to jasper.co/model. Now, Jasper is spelled a little bit differently. It's JASPR.co/model. And it's definitely an investment that's worthy of your family's health. And the cool thing is that when you buy more Jaspers, you'll save even more money. I keep my Jaspers at home with my family, here at the studio, which is actually running right now, and it's there in my sleep sanctuary every single night. So whether you've been impacted by the fires or you simply want to improve and protect your family's health, I highly encourage you to head over to jasper.co/model right now. That's JASPR.co/model right now.
Indoor air quality is much worse than outdoor air quality. So the EPA actually estimates that it could be 3 to 5 times worse indoor air quality than outdoor air quality.
5 times worse?
Yeah, up to 5 times worse.
Why?
People are not opening the windows. There's just not enough ventilation going on in the house. There's excess moisture leading to mold formation, mold growth, and things like that. All of these things are being kicked up into the air that we breathe.
Yeah, there is a lot of smells going on in the average house. So what are some of the most pervasive things? You mentioned plugins earlier. Plug it in, plug it in. Let's talk about that.
Scented plugins. Okay, well, these are, of course, usually made out of synthetic undisclosed fragrances. And the term fragrance on a label can be an umbrella. It is an umbrella term because companies, by law, can use this as proprietary protection for their fragrance formulation. The International Fragrance Association, or IFRA, actually publishes a list of all of the possible chemicals that could be in that word fragrance. There's nearly 4,000 of them right now on that list. There's known carcinogens, there's endocrine disruptors, and fragrance chemicals are some of the most potent allergens known to man. These are all within this umbrella term of fragrance. So think of how many products that you're using that have fragrance in it. If you have these continuous release products like scented plugins, and then you're using the fabric or deodorizing spray, then you've got your scented laundry detergent, and you're not opening your windows. All of these volatile organic compounds, this is what the fragrance chemicals are. They have to volatilize for you to be able to smell them. They're being trapped in your house if you don't open your windows. And you're breathing them in. They attach to house dust, and you recirculate them over and over and over.
So I'm already hearing one of the solutions is to open your damn window.
That's one of the easiest things that you can do is open your windows. Of course, there's caveats to that, nuances. If your outdoor air quality is not favorable, of course, you don't want to let more pollution in. But it really depends where you live. If you live near a busy highway, maybe consider getting an air purifier, or, you can DIY a HEPA box fan filter. That can help too. But you really don't want to you want to minimize creating the pollutants in the first place.
I'm curious about this air quality thing because, again, we're oftentimes just kind of boxed in with all this stuff. And you mentioned things like plugins. What about like when we're cooking? as well. Like, is there anything there for us to be aware of?
Yeah, cooking is actually one of the main sources of pollutants too, because anytime you're creating smoke, those are particles that you don't want to breathe in. So smoke contains carcinogens that are created just in the process of cooking. So it's not necessarily something to be alarmed about, but if you have a vent over your stovetop that vents outside, make sure that happens, because I lived in a place where it vented back inside, which was completely worthless. It was open a window, maybe blow a fan so that the fumes go outside. And of course, try not to burn your food.
Yeah. You shouldn't be burning your food anyways.
Right.
But also, again, just if we can get in a habit of just, again, cracking a window open. And as you mentioned, being able to use that little fan, which a lot of modern ovens have a setting to turn the fan on. But again, making sure that it's not pulling stuff in, which is crazy. And in particular, also, there's some certain things, we were talking about this a little bit before we got started. In the journal Inhalation Toxicology, they specifically identified vegetable oil and that smoke point, when the fumes start happening when you're cooking it, and they found that it was damaging to DNA, to human DNA, which is crazy. Like, we don't think about a smell causing harm literally at the level of our DNA. But inhalation is like a big, like, that's how we interact with our environment in such a profound way, right?
Yeah, inhalation is actually the most sensitive route of human exposure through daily life. It's only second to IV injection. Inhalation, you can die if you breathe in the wrong stuff very quickly, as opposed to putting something on your skin or eating something. Inhalation is the easiest way to increase your toxic load. If you are inhaling polluted air, your body is polluted, because these gases and these particles are very fine. They can penetrate very deeply into the lungs where the alveoli are. Some are even just one cell layer thick. These chemicals and these particles can enter your bloodstream, and they go everywhere in your body.
All right. So the mission today is for us to take our breathing seriously. All right. Shout out to Tony Braxton. We want to breathe again, but we want to breathe again better. And just again, it's just about getting educated and looking at what are some of the cost-effective things that we can do. You know, for right now, for the vast majority of us, just even opening a window occasionally, even if it's, you know, a winter month. Like, if you can crack the window, let a little bit of air in, at least sometime throughout the day. You know, that's one of the things that we would do. Even, you know, I live in Missouri, and there were some pretty strong winters, but just like even cracking the window open, you know, for 20 minutes a day or something like that, just to let in some fresh air and let some of that kind of the toxicity that's built up in the household to be able to dissipate a little bit. So I got to ask you about this one. My oldest son is into candles right now. Let's talk about candles.
Candles. Everybody loves candles, especially around this time of the year. It starts to cool down. People are into the pumpkin spice, the baked apple pie, scented candles. I used to be into that too, so I totally get it. The problem is that most of these candles contain these undisclosed fragrance chemicals, like I mentioned, the carcinogens, the endocrine disruptors, the allergens, not to mention the paraffin wax that they're made of that comes from the crude oil, the petroleum. Burning these creates toluene, benzene, formaldehyde, and ultrafine particles. You don't want to be breathing any of these in. Those are all carcinogens through the route of inhalation.
All right. So the sexy vibe, we got to be more mindful of this with the candles. Are there any candles that are not toxic to us like that?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on this, and it was not easy to find information, but I looked into various plant waxes and beeswax. Mm-hmm. So based on my research, beeswax contains the least amount of pollutants, even though any type of combustion technically is creating pollutants, but beeswax created the least. So that's a good thing to know, right? It's really about taking it back to what our ancestors used to do. Mm-hmm. Like all this new stuff. I've even seen these clear jelly candles. Very odd. I'm positive they're made out of some petroleum ingredient that you don't want to be inhaling either. Just keep it simple. Go back to the basics. You know, beeswax candles. I think people were hand dipping those for like centuries now. You know, it's not that hard.
Yeah, mind your beeswax.
That's right.
All right. I don't know if you remember this. It's got me thinking about the toxic Avenger from back in the day, and I don't know if have you seen this before?
Oh, I don't think I've seen that guy, but I've heard of the name Toxic Avenger.
Yeah, he's pretty he's exposed to a lot of toxins, you know, so he's pretty messed up. He's going around beating people up with a mop. But anyways, but then we've got on the other end, we've got Captain Planet. You remember Captain Planet?
Oh yeah, I loved Captain Planet.
Loki, that's why you got involved.
He's our hero.
There's like there's a parody of Captain Planet. It's played by Don Cheadle, the guy. Do you know Don Cheadle?
The actor.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll put that in show notes for people if it's appropriate. But anyway, so it's just again like these things are kind of put into our culture of avoiding toxins and looking out for the environment, but we forget that we are a part of the environment, and our regulatory bodies are, what's the best word to describe them right now? They're far behind. They're far behind where we are as far as what's getting utilized. And a lot of things are grass, you know, like generally regarded as safe. And they get a free pass into our food supply, into our environment. And we've got to be our own Avenger, our own toxic Avenger in a way, and stack conditions for ourselves. So glutathione is one of those things we could support in our bodies, make sure that we're exercising. And also, I would imagine just the process of moving and sweating occasionally would be helpful as well.
Yeah, definitely. Sweating is a known detox pathway. So environmental chemicals, like I mentioned, the phthalates, some heavy metals, they've all been detected in sweat.
Sweat it out.
So sweat it out.
Key sweat.
60 to 80,000 chemicals are created every year, man-made by us, blasting us in our environment, right? Our homes, our cars, our clothing, our bathroom, our environment, our offices, you name it. So of those, about 1,000 to 1,500 are tested at all. And they're then trying to figure out what is the safety limits. And that's already precarious because real world is massively different than trying to figure out some safety in these things. So think about that. Blasting all of these chemicals out, they're only testing about 1,500. No agency, NIH, CDC, FCC, EPA, no agency has ever done any cross reactions of any of those 60 to 80,000. None, zero, zilch.
Even when they study them, they're studying them in isolation. Combined with the other tens of thousands of chemicals.
Right. So then on top of it, when you're creating products, there is reactions that happen as a result. Dioxins, 1,4-dioxin, like these kind of triclosan, like these kind of things can happen as a result of chemicals interacting, and then it's actually in the product. But since they didn't put it there, it's not on any label. So it's these reactions. That's just a tiny example that we are thrust into. Hey, man, I just want to eat some whole food. So, you know, Shawn, I wrote Super Life. I want people to eat whole food. I would all that stuff. But the elephant in my room was that, well, we have all of this exposure that's undermining some of the greatest engines of our bodies, our hormones, our endocrine system. How are we supposed to thrive if we're limited at what it is that we're talking about and not aware that these chemicals are blasting us? And then you ask yourself, come on, Darin, how could they possibly put chemicals in products that would cause us harm? Well, that's called plausible deniability, right? You know this very well. So like if a company or person running a company, if they don't test it in their product, they don't know that it's dangerous.
Right, yeah.
And then, but if you look at other research and other studies, you're going, no, it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely endocrine disrupting. No, it's showing carcinogenic activity. No, it's showing a hijack of your, endocrine system. Oh, it's showing connections to breast cancer. Oh, it's showing connections to endometriosis. Oh, it's showing connections to asthma and respiratory issues. So they get this pass. I mean, the sum of the whole damn thing, dude, is like, we're going to put these products out there. And when it's overwhelming, if it ever comes to that, we'll then then test it. We'll then take it out, or maybe do something about that. And, you know, so it's this massive experiment. And one of the gnarly ones that we tried to do something for was going back to the pesticides, was DDT, right? So in 1972, they shut down DDT use. Guess what's in 98.6% of all adolescents today? DDT in the blood of 98.6% of all adolescents today. So it's a shining example of a forever chemical, right? So that forever chemical goes into 9,000 different PFAS chemicals, and PFAS is perfluoroalkyl alkali substances, or profluoroalkyl alkali substances. And these are cousins of Teflon, which was created by DuPont and Scotchgard and all of this stuff. And so that pan that you've been keeping around that doesn't stick, that's the mother lode of what Teflon was originally used for. And now those are being phased out, but now it shows up in all of these other areas. So all of this stuff, yeah, it's just nuts. And you know, you and I, before we were, you know, came on here, we're chatting that, you know, when you do your research and you do it so well and you present it, I can tell when you're reading it back that you are you're emotionally, what the right? And it's all over in my book too. And I kind of didn't want to hide that, so I'm just going, is this a good idea, people? Is it like? And then when I'm recording them, I can't help it. It comes out of me going. So everyone listening, it's really hard to understand this level of the matrix, that a product, most of them, that is in your personal care aisles, in a cleaning product in your home, the clothing that you're putting on, the laundry detergent, the fragrance in it, the lotion, all of that stuff, and a whole lot more. It's hard to wrap your head around that there's harmful, knowingly harmful chemicals that are undermining the quality of your life. And are they acute? Are they ionizing, DNA damaging acute, like an X-ray? No. But the persistence of them, and like phthalates, bisphenols, they have half-lives of a couple hours. But the problem is, we keep getting exposed to them over and over and over again because they show up. Parabens, another one, right? We keep reapplying. Well, we started out with lotion in the morning, and then we put sunscreen on in the afternoon, like paraben, ethyl parabens, and like all these different stuff. So our body is getting like it would be like, how would it be if I just slowly just punched you in the nose? Just not hard, but I'm just going to tap you in the nose, but I'm not going to stop for 24 hours. And then the next 24, I'm just going to keep doing it. So these things persist.
Yeah.
And the accumulated body burden that they start using now, in terms of trying to understand, it moves into this category, and I like these terms that are now coming up, the allostatic kind of pressure of the body. And that is that the issue with all of this is, and the 25 researchers I had, and the thousands, what feels like probably pretty close to it, thousands of articles and research I had to read to kind of surmise what each chapter is going to be. the astonishing thing is that, number one, this is allowed at all to happen. And I think that matrix moment is where the data just says it, but that we have this overwhelming pressure of this allostatic pressure of all of these things all the time, that there's not a place that we can go, oh, it's that. Oh, it's, hey, Darin, what, it's just, I'm just wearing these nice little, Lycra underwear. How is that going to kill me? It's not. It's not. But that Lycra, that plastic, plasticizer, elastane, petroleum, endocrine disrupting, coupled with the lotion that you just put on, coupled with the cologne that you just put on, coupled with the shampoo and the conditioner and the fire retardant you just laid down on your sofa, all of those have endocrine disrupting compounds in them. So all of them are adding up to going, stop punching me in the nose, man. Right? Because if I kept popping you in the nose, your nose is going to be sore after 24 hours. You know what I mean?
After months and years, I'm looking like a bulldog out here.
For many years, conventional, quote, non-stick cookware has been used by families under the assumption that they were safe. Conventional non-stick cookware is coated with a material called polytetrafluoroethylene, or PTFE, commonly known as Teflon. Some of the powerful chemicals used to make Teflon provide its remarkable qualities. It's non-stick, it's oil repellent, and it's water repellent. It essentially provides a potent chemical shield. One of the most notorious compounds used to make Teflon cookware is a chemical known as perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA. It's been found repeatedly in peer-reviewed studies to contribute to higher rates of infertility, liver disease, and a variety of cancers. For instance, a study published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute concluded that PFOA is a strong kidney carcinogen, with risk increasing in tandem with levels of exposure. Now, whether it's referred to as PFOA or C8, this chemical is a part of an ever-expanding list of PFAS chemicals, or as scientists are referring to them as, forever chemicals. Finally, in 2013, about just 10 years ago, PFOA was cycled out from use in making cookware. One of the deflection points that DuPont had used for years when it comes to cookware is that this only happens when Teflon pans are heated at high temperatures for long periods of time. You don't have to worry if it's not done under those circumstances. The truth is, those variables change depending upon which dish someone is cooking, but that should have never given PFOAs a free pass in cookware in the first place. More recently, data cited in the journal Environmental Science and Pollution Research International stated that even at normal temperatures, quote, PTFE-coated cookware releases various gases and chemicals that present mild to severe toxicity, unquote. They might have taken PFOA out, but is clearly not the only concern with this toxic cookware. The study goes on to state, quote, due to toxicity concerns, PFOA has been replaced with other chemicals such as Gen X. But these new alternatives are also suspected to have similar toxicity, unquote. In an EPA report with data directly from DuPont, Gen X, their solution to PFOA, their replacement, Gen X was found to be nearly as toxic as the chemicals it was proposed to replace, including being a strong carcinogen, being a strong cancer-causing agent. Is it just this one category of chemicals and this one category of consumer goods, being cookware, that this company was able to sidestep public awareness and sidestep government regulation and continue to harm and literally kill citizens, global citizens? is this just an anomaly? Well, tens of thousands of newly invented chemicals are created and released into our environment each and every year. A recent study published in the journal Frontiers in Ecology and the Environment states that the research community is falling woefully behind in studying the chemicals, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and other novel concoctions discharging into our air, our oceans, waterways, soil, and food chain. Again, the scientific community can't even keep up with all of the newly invented chemicals that these corporations are coming up with, and not to mention their entourage effect. What happens when these chemicals are combined, whether it's in our food, whether it's in our soil, our water system, or in our consumer products? A lot of times these chemicals are studied in isolation. They're not studied with one another. And so this speaks to the importance of us being proactive and not waiting around for these companies and government regulation to get it right. For us to make sure that we're investing in our own health and looking out for our own families and making sure doing to the best of our ability, getting products, especially consumer products and our food, making sure that we're getting our food from great sources, making sure we're getting our consumer products from great sources. And in particular, one of the most impactful changes that we can make is swapping out our toxic cookware and really upgrading our kitchen environment. And I wanted to provide you with some insights, some tips and tools for us to do this work, to swap out some of these toxic cookware items that a lot of times we simply don't even know that these are toxic, that these are utilizing these chemicals, whether it's from some old stuff, because if your family's like mine, we tended to keep pots and pans around for years and years and years, long after they're all chipped up and scraped up. And the era of PFOAs, that cookware is still in circulation. But again, non-stick cookware has been changed. That compound is now actually going to be outlawed in some parts of the world. But the attempts to make non-stick cookware simply led to more toxic compounds being used because they're using that same train of thought, using newly invented compounds to try to trick nature. Whereas we have time-tested cookware options that have been utilized for centuries by humans that are proven to be safe, and they can do a lot of the dynamic things that we want to do in the kitchen, because also we want to enjoy the process of cooking. When it all boils down to it, that's why non-stick cooking was so attractive. It's so seductive. Easier to make the dishes, easier to clean. Who doesn't want that? And so with that said, let's dive into some simple, smart, time-tested upgrades that can do different things and the different things that we want to do in the kitchen. And so to upgrade your cookware, let's start off with one of the most time-tested forms of cookware. And again, this is not for every cooking purpose, but we're going to start off with a great option in the form of stainless steel. Stainless steel is time-tested, incredibly durable, and relatively inexpensive. Stainless steel pots and pans are great for sautéing and browning our food, while stainless steel baking pans are easy and dependable for popping a variety of foods into the oven. Selecting stainless steel-based pressure cookers are a good option as well. By the way, a lot of pressure cookers are utilizing some of those non-stick chemicals that off-gas and get these chemicals into our environment and into our food. So stainless steel cookware is scratch-resistant, long-lasting, and a staple for any healthy kitchen. Now, to be clear, no one said that stainless steel is effectively non-stick or easy to cook with coming out of the gate. You know, if you're a beginner or even a novice, stainless steel does require some finesse to be able to cook with it and to do the things that we want to do in the kitchen. But there are some other options that are much easier to work with. And one of those being cast iron cookware. When a cast iron pan is seasoned properly, it makes a great upgrade for non-stick cooking purposes. It's perfect for high heat cooking and can easily go from stovetop cooking to being placed into the oven. If cared for, a cast iron pan can last for generations. So this is obviously a staple in any health-minded kitchen. And for me personally, I'm very attached to my cast iron pan, so I wasn't really willing or skeptical to utilize anything else. But to take it a step further, for non-stick cooking purposes, for easy cleanup, and also adding beauty to our kitchen, I've got to tell you, my family's been utilizing the beautiful ceramic coated cookware from our place. And we love it. Oh my goodness. My wife, and this is her direct quote, she said that, "I don't think you understand what lengths I'll go to for a non-stick pan." That's a direct quote from Ann Stevenson. She was just saying that in the kitchen one day. And I was like, what lengths will you go through, you know? But anyways, because she knew that I was skeptical on trying anything else and, you know, adding this layer of beauty to our kitchen, also the diversity. You've got all these different types of pots and pans, whether it's their amazing always pan that we use literally every single day, or their perfect pots. And they've got pans and pots of all sizes, so that really helped for us to swap out the old kitchen cookware that we were using and just kind of hanging on to and really just upgrading things with this non-toxic ceramic option. It's so amazing. And again, there's so many beautiful options. Our Place is an absolutely amazing company, and they've really been leading the change. They've always been PFAS free and offers the most durable, toxin-free ceramic coatings, ensuring a healthy, safe cooking experience. And if you want to check them out, they've got over 75,000 five-star reviews, and their award-winning products have been featured in the New York Times, Bon Appetit, and many other places. I'm telling you right now, I was so happy about utilizing these, and the fact that my wife loved them as well, and also just adding the beauty to the kitchen, that dynamic, which I didn't even realize how much more brightness this added to our kitchen. I connected with them, and I wanted to see if there was some kind of discount that we can get for our audience. And fortunately, they were able to hook us up with 10% off store-wide. So if you go to themodelhealthshow.com/ourplace and use the code MODEL at checkout, they're going to get you 10% off all of their incredible cookware. And also they got some great appliances as well. One of those other things that I wanted to make sure that you know about, where we have this plasticized coating, is air fryers. All right. Air fryers are popping out here and they're awesome. All right. But again, you can just be air frying and polluting the air in your kitchen substantially. And also these compounds are getting into your food if you're not utilizing an air fryer that's free of these compounds. And Our Place has you covered there as well, because they've got an incredible air fryer that does other jobs as well, called the Wonder Oven. So again, so many great things. Check them out. Go to themodelhealthshow.com/ourplace. All right. This is where you're going to get your hookup. When you're at checkout, use the code MODEL. Use the code MODEL for 10% off. And one other word, we just decided to get an entire cookware set. And so they also have deeper discounts on those things that are already there. And so you'll be able to take advantage of those deeper discounts. Again, when you go to themodelhealthshow.com/ourplace. Now, keep in mind, this episode is very, very important, very, very powerful, because we're exposing one of the most nefarious acts that have taken place in modern human society. We had a corporation knowingly poisoning our citizens with this newly invented chemical, promising all these great benefits, and knowing how much it was going to cost them to pull that chemical out. And that's what it was really about. Skating by, doing whatever they could, as long as they could, to make as much money as they could by avoiding changing out something that they knew was dangerous. And I'm telling you, DuPont is not the only company that has done that. We've got to do better. But one of the most important things that we can do is to vote with our dollar. When we find out that these organizations are practicing business like this, we have to stand up. We have to say no, and we have to invest our dollars in companies that are doing the right thing. And also, we have to stay educated, and we have to start seeing through different eyes, seeing through different lenses, because we live in a world right now that is radically different from just a century ago. I mean, radically different, right? So now if we're born into this world, unfortunately, but it is what it is. We're born into a very toxic environment, but the good news is we are resilient. Humans are so powerful to be able to adapt, to become stronger when faced with adversity. But that means we have to take care to let's limit our exposure to the best of our ability to these toxins that are coming through our food. Mainly, we're going to find the vast majority of newly invented chemicals in ultra-processed food. So eating real food, eating more real food, nutrient-dense food, doing our best to eat organic when we can, using non-toxic cookware, using, to the best of our ability, non-toxic personal care and cleaning products. Again, really taking control of our own home environment. That's where we have the most power. Once we step foot outside of our doors, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but we know that we can create a movement. You know, there's a tipping point as this information gets out to more people, to more families, and our demand and our standards is elevated. Right now, we're in a transitionary phase, but the great news is we have access to information like this that's directly right there with us all the time. All you got to do is click play, and you can get educated, and you can make healthier decisions. But we've got to share this information. That tipping point to where health is normalized, where we stop allowing companies to self-regulate and create all these dangerous chemical compounds and then releasing them into our environment that's causing our citizens harm. That change, that tipping point, us reaching that is going to be accelerated by you making an impact, number one, within your own household, but then impacting one family member, maybe your community, maybe your neighborhood, maybe an online community, but just sharing your voice, sharing your experience, sharing this information. So please share this information out. Send this episode to somebody that you care about. Get this education into more people's hands. So it's said that when we know better, we do better. And knowledge is not power in and of itself. Knowledge is potential power. When we apply that knowledge, when knowledge is activated, that's where the real power is. So take this information that you learned today and do something. Take action. Make an upgrade. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
The best filter of all time is nature. The sun, the wind, the trees, the ocean, the UV light. So the more rain and the more wind, the filtration will naturally happen. But yeah, I'm pretty concerned. What needs to happen now is varying levels of a smoke detox.